Hey, there you are. We are looking forward to a wild card matchup between Joe Flacco, who I'm considering suing because I've recovered lost memories, repressed memories since the Texans faced Joe Flacco. I'd completely forgotten that I once lost a game to Boomer Esiason when he was in his mid 30s. It was my rookie year. Boomer Esiason came in a Bengals game and beat us when we had a healthy lead. And then Randall Cunningham. I lost to Randall Cunningham, kids. That's how old this guy is. Also, when I was a pretty young player, Randall Cunningham came in and beat us. We got beat by two old men, and now Joe Flacco has beat my football team as an old man himself. So whatever pain and suffering that's caused, the only thing that will salvage him and save him from the vicious onslaught that is my legal team is a Texans victory. So that's it. He's got no choice but to tank this thing. Joe Flacco. I'm gonna watch Joe Flacco, Greg Newsome, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I apologize if I mess his name up 10 times today. Press conference today. All three of those guys did good things versus the Texans. JOK had an interception, of course, versus the Texans, but the Texans were undermanned, and it's no excuse. It's no excuse for losing. But when you handicap this game, and people wonder how come the Texans are only 1.5-point underdogs as of the filming of this here episode, then injuries are a big part of it, and one of them is C.J. Stroud. This is where I think sometimes people forget. Just because Joe Flacco is the fourth option at quarterback and he's balling his face off, that doesn't mean that just every single team can do that. Case Keenum and Davis Mills, the two-headed monster of those two guys at quarterbacks versus that Browns defense, it's kind of a big deal. But I digress. Let's listen to Joe Flacco and see if he can stave off my attorneys. Also, I'm guessing I did the SEO on this to specifically hopefully attract some Browns fans, not for smack talk, but for educational purposes. I would love to get your input on some of the things here. When Joey, I'm sure he's going to mention some things I'm unfamiliar with, and I also need you guys to explain Greg Newsome's glasses to me at some point. Let's see. I hope the Texans pull off the upset this weekend. Tired of hearing about Flacco. I'm sorry. If he was so good, why was he sitting at the house and nobody wanted him? I know, Shane. We're going to have to talk about that. I think it's a sign of the times and the way things are changing, particularly with what you're allowed to do and not do. Yes, noontime live. All right, here we go. Joe Flacco, ladies and gentlemen. Please let me know ASAP if you cannot hear the audio. Nobody's talking yet, so can't hear that. Can't hear the nothing. You can hear him breathing.
Joe, when you go back to the 2012 playoff run, what was it about that team going into that run that you guys were able to capitalize on? And, for you personally, how were you feeling going into those playoffs? And did you catch, kind of a hot streak at the right time?
Okay, so the Baltimore Ravens, when they won their Super Bowl, Joe Flacco had not renegotiated his contract before that season. He turned down the offer the Ravens gave him, and they were about to head into an absurd stretch of Joe Flacco play, the likes of which we haven't seen since. That was 11 years ago. So that's where we are right now.
We had been through so much as a team at that point, so I think we were able to draw on a lot of that to have confidence. When you look back at that one, we lost 3 games at the end of the year right in a row, but I think we were 9-2 going into that. So you can say that we hit a hot streak for sure, but we were just a really good football team for a few years there. And we had a lot of confidence because of that. We had been through a lot together. Not that everybody was the same, but there was a lot of key guys on that team that had been around for a while and been through a handful of playoff games. So we were battle tested in that respect. I just think every team's got its own little unique personality, and that one had it. And, like I said, there was a lot of things that went into why we were able to have the confidence to get through it.
Obviously, the teams are
different. I think the one thing with Flacco that you see now is that he's just so good at throwing the deep ball. And particularly if the Texans decide not to cover guys like Amari Cooper, not to bracket him when they're supposed to, it's kind of a big deal because he's going to make you pay. I think that's one of the biggest factors in this game is we can get to some of the actual personnel, but the mental errors on the back end, you just can't get away with it with this guy. He's playing too well. I also think it's interesting right there that he pointed out the Ravens had lost 3 games headed into the playoffs there. That they were a little bit, they were a 6 seed, but not in quite the same way as most 6 seeds. But they also didn't have as awesome a defense as the Ravens typically did, as opposed to the Browns, who now have a better defense this year than Joe Flacco had when they won the Super Bowl. And they also did have the Hugh Jackson introduced deer antler velvet spray. Remember that had the IGF-1 in it, supposedly, which is complete bunk. Don't buy that stuff on the internet. Honestly, the Ravens kind of got away with one there, except that the supplement they were using was so bunk and garbage and unable to actually do anything that I think the NFL just kind of let it slid.
Different, but this team has gone through a lot too to get to this point. Is that something that you guys can draw on?
I think so. Yeah, it always helps to go through tough times and truly be tested, whether that's injuries or close games, finding your identity, things like that. They all help.
You had a really unbelievable.
Yeah, like this Browns team, kind of like the Texans. I mean, more so with the Browns. I'm going to try to be as diplomatic and even-minded and handed here as possible, because certainly, we've got to stay focused. I've been listening to D'Amico and CJ all week, but the adversity that the Browns have been through, it's kind of unprecedented in the way that they've maintained this defensive performance through all these different quarterbacks. Usually teams will start to, well, I was on a team like that. I was on a team like that in 1999. Well, no, actually, I wasn't on a team like that at all. I had an awesome defense on the other side. Our defense just fell apart at the end of the season. So I guess because of that, I was on a team where we went 14-2 in the regular season, but the defense fell apart because of injuries, illness, and other factors by the end of the season. And that was with an awesome offense on the other side of us. I've been on a team that had a really good defense, but also a bad offense, and I knew how taxing it was. And we didn't play anywhere near like the way the Browns have played defensively through all of the change and the struggles offensively. And yet here the Browns sit, and they're like the 10th scoring offense in the league. It's pretty damn impressive.
Unbelievable run individually that postseason. I mean, that was just about every one of those games. And is that the best you can remember playing?
A bunch of things just came together right at the right time. We kind of manipulated our front a little bit with who was starting in our offense, on our offensive line, and I think that really was a big part of it. And then things just kind of go your way. There's a little bit of, fate that's involved there. I mean, we got off to a good start with a home game against Indy, and then, went and played a crazy game in Denver, and then went back to New England where we had some history. I mean, that was the 3rd playoff game I think I'd played up there at that point. So like I said, I just in that unique instance, we had been up there a bunch of times, and we had lost an AFC Championship game there the year before. So there was definitely things that we could draw on at that time.
I'm sure this is way more interesting to people in that division because they obviously lived through all of that and all those years of playing Joe Flacco. Somebody brought up a good point here. Okay. Or a good question. Do we have our full secondary for the first Browns game? Remember, Jimmy Ward was injured in the 4th play. Steven Nelson left the game, came back in. They were banged up. The play that Amari Cooper got the touchdown down the left sideline, that was D'Angelo Ross's first snap on defense of the season. And Jalen Petrie jumped the Njoku route underneath, leaving D'Angelo Ross all alone to get beat by Amari Cooper. So it's a combination of health and just mental errors, just bad mental errors at times. That's where staying healthy is obviously, you're not getting Jimmy Ward back, but hopefully you keep Steven Nelson. The other big question people have is, why did Derek Stingley not start traveling with Amari Cooper once Steven Nelson went down? The simplest answer I could give is that, for one, Derek Stingley is still a very young player who's gotten very comfortable playing on the left side. It's not so simple to ask him not just to go play on the right side, but also to play slot. Because if he's going to track Amari Cooper and then Amari Cooper's in the slot, then all of a sudden you've got a guy who so far has taken 3 snaps in the slot this season and 9 snaps in the slot last year, and asking him to cover a really good receiver in the slot. Not to mention, you then also take guys who are already maybe best fit at their positions, and you're slot flopping them over to play left cornerback. It's just, for a team whose biggest issue right now defensively is mental errors and broken, like to the tune of letting Zach Wilson have his best game he's ever had in the NFL. Like, that's how bad the mental errors and the coverage busts have been. I don't want to mess with everybody so much that they make more mental errors. I'm cool just letting Derek Stingley lock down or close to lock down the left side of the field and make it simpler for everybody else. And everybody else just has to be smarter than they were in that game, and healthier. Because also, as far as the health overall, Will Anderson was out and John Grenard went down early in that game. So the one weakness on this team for the Browns, or one of the few weaknesses they really have, it's a well-constructed roster, are the offensive tackles. So Will Anderson and John Grenard, if they can be healthy, if they can be impactful, it's huge this week, because that's the Achilles heel of the Browns right now.
You prepared to face opponents, a second time a lot in your career. Is there anything different going into this week that you do differently?
You just go prepare. I mean, I've said it to some of the guys, like, there's not this daunting task of like getting ready to prepare for 20 games. You're preparing for one game, and that's it. You're promised one game here. So I think I think that's something good to fall back on. And like, I think you can get comfort in that. One game, prepare as hard as you can for 1 week. And then when that's all done, we'll pick up and see where we're at. As far as playing these guys a couple weeks ago, I'm sure there's things that we'll take, from the time that we played them, but each game is its own unique challenge. And these guys are a good football team, and we're excited for the opportunity to go play a tough game.
What do you think?
He said they're a good football team. I might not sue him. We'll see. I think that's, if I were the coach of the Browns, if I were Kevin Stefanski, I think what I would really worry about, because this is how, you guys know how football coaches are wired, they're going to be paranoid about complacency. They're going to be paranoid about the fact that the Browns did just beat up on the Texans. And it's easy, just like for fans, it's easy to forget. For players, it's easy to forget that, hey, that team, the Texans team that the Browns played and beat, I'm not making excuses, but it's a different team that had arguably its 5 best players out, and one of those players was CJ Stroud. So it's going to be a different game. I think it's going to be a different atmosphere. That was the day before Christmas, and I expect more raucousness in this crowd.
And in what ways does it help having been there before?
I'm sure there's a level of importance to it in terms of letting the football game come to you, not necessarily riding too high and riding too low when things happen, realizing that it is another football game. But ultimately, the most important thing in playoff games is executing your fundamentals to the highest degree. And I don't think that necessarily takes experience to do. It just takes you staying level-headed and playing within yourself.
Joe, how do you account for your personal record in the postseason on the road is second only to Brady as far as number of wins on the road?
Oh, wow. Okay. His number of wins on the road in the playoffs is second only to Tom Brady, I believe. Is that what that dude just said?
How do you account for that?
Like I said, I think it just goes back to doing the basics the right way, not overthinking what it means to go on the road, just going and playing a good football game. And, when the dust settles, like I said, you pick your head up and you see where you are.
My advice would be to get on a team that tends to be a playoff caliber team every single year. And that's one of those things where, man, when Bill Belichick just, I think, tied the record for most losses ever, which is, actually in his case, it's a pretty big honor because it's just a testament to how long he's been able to coach. You're going to get a lot of losses when you're also that close to a number of wins, total number of wins all time. It's actually impressive that he's able to accumulate that many losses. I think with Flacco, I guess I would say, okay, you have that many playoff wins and yet only that one Super Bowl. That's probably like a little bit of a feeling of unfulfillment. That's me at my most haterish.
Joe, I mean, it's
I think anytime you get to be in the playoffs and win football games, there's some party that takes pride in that, no matter where it is. This is what we go to work for every day, is to be in this position and to play these types of games. So I think we should all hold our head high. Like, we earned the right to be playing this Saturday, and you should, gain something from that. But like I said, once you lace them up and once you're actually out in the field, none of that matters.
Joe,
Can you
the
take back
Texans found out
I think okay. I don't know what the question exactly was, but he's saying that they earned the right. Yeah, I don't think anybody's doubting that. I wonder like who's more of a darling right now? Is it the Browns or the Texans? The Browns obviously have the whole, overcoming their history and everything, and the unlikeliness of having a fourth string quarterback. I shouldn't say fourth string, your fourth quarterback starting and playing as well as he is. And yet, I do feel like there's still a little bit of institutional skepticism about the whole Deshaun Watson situation. Whereas with the Texans, people have latched on to CJ Stroud and they really, really love him, like all across the league. So, boy, if they're all saying, but they're coming out of a void in which people had been using them as just a scapegoat for any and all problems that plague not just the Texans, but society at large. I feel like it might be the Texans still because of CJ Stroud.
Texans found out on Christmas Eve what happens when they don't pressure you. How do you feel they'll adjust to that?
I'm not in their heads. I think that
I got to hear the rest of that. I get too distracted by your guys' good comments. Oh, he's not distracted by that. Let's see.
To be playing this Saturday, and you should, gain something from that.
Sorry.
But like I said, once you lace them up and once you're actually out in the field, none of that matters.
Joe,
Can you
the
take back
the Texans found out on Christmas Eve what happens when they don't pressure you. How do you feel they'll adjust to that?
The Texans found out on Christmas Eve what happens when they don't pressure you. Oh, that pisses me off, despite its accuracy.
I'm not in their heads. I think that we'll have our plan, and as long as we execute our plan, then all that stuff will kind of fall into place. Listen, when you play in this league, a lot of these games come down to getting pressure on the quarterback, and there's multiple ways to do that. Do you do that with your front? Do you do that by putting pressure with your, by bringing linebackers, by bringing secondary guys? So we'll see. I mean, our offensive line has done a great job since I've been here. And like I said, there's going to be times where teams come try to pressure you. And those usually lead to opportunities if you're on top of your stuff. So it's just part of the game. Every week you have to be ready for teams to do that. And that's part of prepping as an offense. And like I said, I'm not in Houston and I don't really know what's going through those guys' heads. So we're just going to prepare like we always do.
Joe, can you think
so
back?
as far as pressuring Flacco, for one, I mean, they flushed him, they pressured him. Flacco did a really good job of scrambling, buying time, throwing on the run. There were times where the Texans lost edge discipline on bootlegs. In the run game, they lost on that direct snap to Ford. Stingley made a mistake in leverage on that one that he actually corrected the next week and made a really good play versus Derrick Henry. But Will Anderson was out. John Grenard got hurt early in the game. This Texans pass rush has become really disciplined and has been good at keeping people in the pocket. They lost it versus Flacco. And Flacco, and look, I think in a lot of ways he's more mobile than he was before. I don't know if it's just having fresh legs, whatever workout regimen he's on, the fact that quarterbacks don't get hit anymore. You certainly can't let him run and scramble around because he's shown he's very good at throwing on the move. So there's that. I think the one comment here, Daniel, I'm going to disagree with you slightly. He says we need to stop the run and force Flacco to win with his arm. We need pressure on Flacco. Don't give him time, and he will make mistakes. Yes, he'll make mistakes. I think some of his interception numbers are more kind of like veteran. All right, like they were versus the Texans. He threw 2 interceptions versus the Texans. I would argue that neither of them were really a big deal from a quarterback standpoint. Threw a deep interception late in the first half that you could look at as like an arm punt. The Texans would have had time to score, except they threw an interception or turned the ball over quickly. And then they threw an interception right after that, the last play of the first half, which that one wasn't a big deal at all. He was just taking a chance. The thing about the run is the Texans held the Browns to 1.8 yards per attempt. The Browns have not run the ball well at all with Flacco in the game, and they don't care because they're kind of like the Texans in that they're using the run to set up the play action, whether the run is effective or not. So, yes, stop the run, continue to do that, but it's not as simple as like, hey, if they stop the run and put it on Joe Flacco's arm, then they've won the game. Because that's exactly been the winning formula for the Browns. I think it's just like don't sleep on this team and think that this is just some fluke by Joe Flacco and versus the Texans. It was because guys were injured or something. Like they've been legitimately picking teams apart. The plays that they made, the Texans had some bad blown coverages and mental errors, missed tackles, but the Browns made enough just good plays that were genuinely awesome throws and catches, like to have won that game already. It's like it's way more than just some fluke out of Joe Flacco.
Stroud.
You guys are making me feel really nauseous and having to heap this much praise on a guy I'm about to sue.
Did you get to watch him at all on Saturday night? And what are your thoughts on him going against you guys this time?
I've only gotten to watch him a little bit, but he's been really impressive. Just from afar, like in terms of his decision making and the way everything's kind of looked. Like you can tell he can throw the ball. I didn't get a chance. It's not like I follow college football a ton. And Ohio State always has somebody, it seems like the last few years, that are getting drafted in the top of the draft in the spring. But it seems like he has a lot of arm talent, and the impressive part is the fact that he's been able to make really good decisions all year. So a lot of credit to him for sure.
Can you think back to your first play?
All right, so you know what? I'll credit Joe Flacco for not going in too deep on. Soon he'll be a retired athlete, and like 75% of my brethren that try to go into media, they just talk out of their ass when they haven't actually watched film. I feel like Joe Flacco would actually watch the film. Seth, do you think we should play Keenum instead of Stroud? He doesn't have an experience against them. I've got to think about that one, Hack-a-Shack.
Playoff game, Joe, were you overwhelmed at all, or did you have that attitude that you're talking about?
You know what? We played Miami. We were down in Miami. We played them earlier in the year and played a good game against them. So I think we just, I can't remember the exact emotions that were going through my body, but I'm sure they were pretty much the same that I deal with today. I don't remember being overwhelmed or anything. We had a good football team that year, and like I said, we had played them and beat them earlier in the year, so I think we drew, maybe something from that. I was probably naive to a certain extent because it probably didn't matter, but as a rookie, you're just trying to you truly are trying to keep things as simple as possible and do the basics. And I think, like I said earlier, I think that does lend itself well to playing your best football in the playoffs. So,
okay, Joe Flacco, his rookie year in the playoffs against Miami, Baltimore won that game 27-9. Wait a minute. He completed 39% of his passes for 135 yards. 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 9 for 23. Then they beat Tennessee. They won that game 13-10. Flacco completed 50% of his passes for 161 yards. Quarterback rating, he showed improvement. And then, my God, Baltimore at Pittsburgh in the championship game in 2008, they lost 23-14. Flacco completed 43% of his passes, 13 for 30, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Oh my gosh. How the hell? I'll tell you what, man, things have changed so much in terms of how much time they'll give a young quarterback, or just not run him out of town. Wow.
Murray has a game like he did in your first trip to Houston. How different do you expect them to approach him?
Tim, that is one of the lamest and dumbest things I've seen. I expect better out of you, Tim. That's a silly, stupid thing. Joe Flacco would laugh about that. This is where I question, Tim, just how tough you are in your actual personal life and in general. Because, like, if Joe couldn't handle that amount of ribbing and laughing, where I've done nothing but heap praise on Joe this entire time, you can just you're sicking me, Tim Green. You're sicking me. You don't deserve the same name as your namesake, former defensive end for the Falcons, Tim Green. Out of here.
So, not let that happen again.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think anytime somebody plays like that, you're definitely going to go into that game and say, all right, we're not getting beat by that guy again. But once again, it's not my job to worry too much about that. It's my job to go out there and play on Saturday and just, do what the defense tells me. And you don't want to overthink it either. You don't want to, you don't want to take your head off of Amari just because you think that they're going to have some gigantic plan for him. We got to be ready for everything.
What were the benefits?
Timmy Green. Hey, Timmy, what were your first-year stats, Tim? Give me your first-year stats and let me know. You post them up right there, Tim Green, the upset.
The Cincinnati weekend to you?
I'd say no. You know what? I'm actually a little tuned in. I get so many people that get like upset on behalf of other men. Like, don't be soft on behalf of another person. Like Joe Flacco would be upset that you're being soft on behalf of Joe right now because that's a bad look for Joe. Okay.
Well, I think ultimately it's just this team has gone through a lot, and I think just as a whole, being able to get guys that have been dealing with stuff for the last 20 weeks, since they've come back for training camp, to give them a chance to kind of get off of their feet again and get a little mental breather and get ready for this week.
I think as far as the Browns' freshness goes, there's not any part of that team that other than they lose one of the best running backs in franchise history for a team that's had a good running back or two. They've withstood all of these quarterback issues. It almost feels like in some ways like the adversity the Browns have faced has been a little bit of a shot of novelty that they've had to overcome. So they've had that experience. I think this is going to be too fresh and motivated. And like in the case of the Texans, a very young football team that's maybe too young and stupid to even know they're tired. Stupid in a good way, like your kid brother is stupid.
Them going into this game, does that defense look any different from when you played them on Christmas Eve to these last couple of weeks here? There's
slight differences. They have some different guys that are back or a little bit more banged up. Like we just talked about Amari, maybe they'll do certain things with them, but I think this defense believes in what they do ultimately, and they're going to do what they think they do well. They're going to do that. So there's always going to be little wrinkles, but it's our job to attack and prepare for what they do well, and then adjust from there.
I think the big thing is that DeMeco's pretty selective in when he blitzes and where. And the question would be, all right, how complex can the Texans get defensively without making the mental errors on the back end? And I think that's been the dividing line for DeMeco all year long, where I think he's had to fight some of the things he wants to do, where with some of the personnel he had in San Francisco, especially in the linebacking core, with veteran savvy guys like Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga, the safety, they were able to disguise, they were able to give the illusion of complexity really well. I think when he's tried to do that this year, this is where you get some of the mental errors and the blown coverages, which is a shame in why, versus a guy like Joe Flacco, who's seen it all, you need to be able to do that a little bit. You need to be able to flummox him somehow. And short of that, even if you can't do that well, like the pass rush, John Grenard might be the key to this game. If he can go out and play and play like he's 90% of his healthy self, that could be huge. And Will Anderson, obviously, too. How many snaps can you get out of him to make him as uncomfortable as possible and not be able to use all that veteran savvy? That's the key to this week. Mental errors and pass rush off the edges.
January football since you got here and what it's like. Did you address the team this week about any of that, or has that just kind of been addressed in the process of them being here?
Well, we had a team meeting yesterday, and we were able to address that a little bit, and and just hear from some different.
Sorry, I missed. I want to be sure I hear the question on this one.
Addressed in the process of them being here.
To attack and prepare for what they do well, and then adjust from there.
Joe, you've been talking about January football since you got here and what it's like. Did you address the team this week about any of that, or has that just kind of been addressed in the process of them being here?
Well, we had a team meeting yesterday, and we were able to address that a little bit, and and just hear from some different stories about what playoff football is all about and stuff like that, and how much does that ultimately mean? You never know, but it is cool to hear some different perspectives on on what people feel like it takes to win at this time of the year. So
you did.
CJ Stroud and Will Anderson both talked about, who was it that spoke? Robert Woods, and I'm blanking on who the other guy that spoke was. Oh, Sheldon Rankins spoke about that kind of stuff last week. Because last week was a playoff game for the Texans. I guess that's where for some of the young guys, the Texans basically have a playoff game under their belt already, because both the Colts and the Texans, that was winning you're in, losing you're out for those guys. So they got their speech last week between Robert Woods, between those two guys, and they thought it was pretty impactful. I look forward to hearing which veterans speak this week about that stuff.
A little bit.
What does it take to win? Last one.
I'll say it again. Everybody, everybody puts so much thought into what it takes to win these games, and it's doing the simple things the best you can, and just playing good fundamental football. And this is the time of the year where that stuff shows up. Obviously, there's going to be plays made, and guys are going to make a name for themselves that something's going to happen over the next 5 weeks that we're going to remember forever. But and those are the things that you kind of see. But it's just about playing fundamental physical football and playing a full 60 minutes. And no matter what's going on at the moment, being able to keep the blinders on and keep moving forward.
Did you play D'Amico?
The thing about him is he looks every bit the part of a guy that's just like any Hollywood cliche you want to use, like the old cop that's seen it all, or the cowboy that rolls into town and he's just nothing's gonna phase him or anything. That part of it, in terms of just being calm, cool, and collected through all of this, that's an advantage that he has. Then he's already proven it, obviously, in the playoffs when they won the Super Bowl. I think with CJ, CJ's got that perfect balance of fiery youth, but also a maturity about him where I don't worry about that at all. And he showed last year in the Peach Bowl that he can rise to the occasion in these big games. D'Amico, likewise, I think is, if you were to do the thing that my co-host Sean Pendergast likes to do, which is, okay, take the two quarterbacks, put them up, pictures of them up on your computer, and then take the two head coaches and put pictures of them up on your computer. And who do you trust more? Obviously I love CJ, but I have a hard time figuring out, okay, in this moment right now, who do I trust more? Joe Flacco and the way he's been playing, or CJ Stroud? Let's call that a draw. If we look at Stefanski and D'Amico Ryans, honestly, yes, Stefanski is an offensive-minded head coach, and Stefanski has done great things with all these quarterbacks this year. Just looking at their pictures and having watched Stefanski for a few years and D'Amico all this year, where D'Amico just has not made game management errors the way veteran coaches make game management errors. There's just never been a wavering at all in emotion or anything in a bad way. And I know Stefanski's a pretty even-keeled guy. I actually feel better about the defensive-minded rookie head coach right now than I do about Stefanski. And I say that knowing that Stefanski's probably going to win or coach of the year. So it's not like I hate Stefanski or anything. I just feel that confident in the maturity level of both D'Amico and CJ. It doesn't feel like we're going into this with a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback.
Almost the same age. Can you imagine being a head coach right now?
No. I've never had any aspirations of being a coach. I guess if I really, really thought hard about it, you could wrap your head around certain aspects of it. But man, like just all that you have to deal with being a head coach, and the way you have to be in front of the team every single day. I think more so just the scheme part of it. I think as a player, there's a certain part of it that and as a quarterback, you're always simplifying things so that you can go out there and play fast. But to be on top of everything and to be able to teach every single position on an offense or defense, and then like put it all together and build it, it's impressive. It's really impressive. And I know he's played and I know he's been in it, but it's different than teaching other people. So yeah, it's definitely pretty cool to see. You can see obviously that he's been motivated since he's been done playing, and probably even at some point when he was playing, to do something like this. So yeah, a lot of credit to him. All right, guys.
I didn't hear the question apparently, but I guess he was asked about D'Amico specifically, and whether or not Joe would think about coaching. Yeah, that's it's got to be in you. And D'Amico took a year or two to figure out whether he wanted to go into it. And then he did the thing, you start off as basically a quality control guy at San Francisco, where you're just doing grunt work and long hours and all of that. That's where you really figure out whether you want to be a coach. That's why I was so dead set against hiring Josh McCown, not because I don't think he can't be a good head coach someday. And not that I think that you necessarily have to have like that normal indoctrination process, but you just like, I know like I got a lot of high school and college coaches that watch this channel. You guys know, like, you don't know whether that life is for you until you live it. And then especially at, the NFL level, where it is a 18-hour-a-day job, you just flat out don't know. So, and then it's got to be in your blood. You don't do that like high school coaches. You don't do it for the $2,500 extra you make, or whatever you get tacked onto your salary. You do it because you love it. If you're doing it, I would say there's NFL coaches who maybe keep doing it for the money, but I don't know when you get into it. Like, especially like anybody coaching right now until the last few years, it's not like being a head coach was an avenue to being super rich really until like the last 10 years or so, or 15 years or so. Things have just changed. Let me pontificate on the economics of coaching. For me, it was always very much, when people ask if I want to coach, it was a combination of, I don't know if I'd be any good at it. Hey, okay, Tim Green and some of the other brownies that are around, please tell me what's going on with Greg Newsome's glasses here. Is this I honestly, I don't know. Is this like a running season-long thing, or was this something he did? Does he explain this? Maybe he'll explain it. I just don't want to, if this is something that's been discussed and I just missed all the articles about it, I don't want to sound like a dullard.
What's up?
How are you? How's that cool?
Doing good.
That's wild.
Greg,
Wildcard round. How'd you come up with the glasses?
Oh, they're wild cards. Those are the Uno wild cards. Oh, I feel so stupid.
Just something we thought about. Just trying to do something creative, each weekend. What not better than the Uno wild card glasses?
Okay, you said it each weekend. Is that usually, does he do like a the running back that went from Denver to Washington? I'm blanking on his name right now. Oh, stupid. But he used to do a different character every week for his appearance.
You good at that game?
I'm amazing. Yeah.
The better corner or wow?
See, that's like, it's debatable. That's just like one of those is Michael Jordan the GOAT or LeBron. So I think it's debatable. Yeah.
What are your thoughts going into this game? You guys already won down in Houston, but now you got to play them again in a one-game season.
Man, first just blessed and excited, man. Just for the opportunity. This is my first time getting to the playoffs, so just super excited. But I mean, obviously, the challenge of playing the team twice. As you can see, for instance, us in our division, losing to the Ravens once, beating them the second time. It's hard to beat a team twice. So our mentality is just to go in there. We know some things won't go our way. That's the game of football. But just to stay together like we've been the whole entire season.
Okay, that was one thing. Like, I'm glad Greg Newsome brought that up too, because I know one of the angles for a while when the Browns came to play the Texans was that the Browns weren't good on the road. They did beat the Ravens on the road. They had beaten the Ravens on the road already. So like that was one of the indicators that, man, all right, this Browns team is no fluke. That didn't feel like that wasn't like one of the fluke games like when the Cowboys lose to the Cardinals or something. That was, the Ravens losing to the Browns was nothing like that. So like they've beat the Ravens on the road. They beat the Texans, who are a playoff team, on the road. I'm not buying that part of it. I do think that it's hard to beat the same team twice when they're good teams. Like maybe that's one of those things that people say that maybe it's just more obvious that it's harder to beat a good team twice at any given time.
Does this team look with CJ from what you guys have watched so far, and just the challenge of going against such a team seen in a couple weeks ago?
A lot different. CJ is not just the best rookie quarterback, but he's one of the best quarterbacks in the whole entire NFL. So he presents a lot of challenges for us, but I think we're up for the challenge.
How important was it for you, Greg?
Yeah, we talked about that this morning. CJ, like in so many ways, he still has room to grow. He talked on the McAfee show, which I'm going to watch. We'll watch clips from the McAfee show after all of this. I just wanted to do it last in case they do a copyright strike on it, because I've got longer clips. But he doesn't really come off like a rookie quarterback. He talked about how he had more responsibilities in his system at Ohio State, which I do believe. That offense has always been more complex than people wanted to acknowledge. I think people felt like, well, he must be just doing the exact same stuff that Cardale Jones was doing. Now that offense was tailored to what each various quarterback could and couldn't do, and I think that'll grow with time. But right now, like, you don't look at CJ the same way you look at other promising rookie quarterbacks, because so many times quarterbacks who come out as rookies and do really well either have an awesome run game supporting them and an awesome defense on the other side. He had a good defense, not an awesome defense, but a good defense, and he had no support from the running game at all until the second half of the season, and had like backup offensive linemen shuffling in and out all year long, to the point where early in the season he had 4 backup offensive linemen and he was still playing pretty well. So yeah, he's a veteran quarterback at this point, hopefully with room to grow.
To have that Sunday off when you guys played the Bengals?
It was important. Obviously, man, I missed it. I hate just sitting there and not playing. But it was definitely important just to get my body a little bit, more fresh, just to get into this, final 4-game stretch.
So their passing defense, very, very good. And they play a lot of man. They're going to just try to blanket guys and make things as difficult as possible. They didn't have Case Keenum in the last game, they didn't have CJ Stroud in the last game. I mean, Case Keenum and Davis Mills threw for fewer than 50 yards in the first half. It was just night and day. The biggest question, though, remains, what do you do without Tank Dell versus a really good defense like this? I think Robert Woods and Noah Brown, to a certain degree, but especially Robert Woods, are really important in this game. If they can be healthy, you're not going to replace Tank Dell, but obviously the Browns are adept at, they're going to make life as difficult as possible on Nico Collins. So I don't expect Nico to get 200 yards receiving in this game like he did last week. But he can eat as long as those other guys are available. And I think Dalton Schultz he'll be an impact player, but Robert Woods, in those first 2 games of the season when he had 12 receptions before Tank Dell really started to emerge, he was a nice security blanket where you'd catch it, even if he was covered, and he'd get 0 yards after the catch, but it would be for a first down. And he just kept the chains moving. They need that production from Robert Woods this week if he's healthy.
Greg, if you had time to reflect at all, kind of where you were last year, unsure about your role, but kind of where you are now, and going into the playoffs, you seem pretty happy. Time to kind of reflect as to where things are coming here.
Nah, just because my role is still continuing right now. We still got a lot of football left.
All right, I missed that. Let me back that up a little.
Kind of where you are now, and going into the playoffs, you seem pretty happy. Time to kind of reflect as to where things are coming here.
Nah, just because my role is still continuing right now. we still got a lot of football left to play. So, reflection normally comes at the end of the season. But right now I'm just trying to, whatever my role is this playoffs, try to do it to the best of my ability.
So Greg Newsome, he's in his third year, right? Yeah, third year in the NFL, Northwestern kid. Those are, for those of you who are asking, those are Uno Wildcards. That's his Northwestern humor there. But like, this is still this defense by the Browns. Sorry guys, I had a little bit of a glitch here. Like there's not, when you look at their entire defense, the weak spots potentially maybe is when they're in base defense. I don't think I don't think they're just stacked all across the board at all three. They've only got 2 really good linebackers when they could have 3. But everybody's just generally pretty solid. And like the way that Jim Schwartz has them playing is very much the way that D'Amico wants to play. Like Jim Schwartz, for those of you that missed the time I did the family tree on this, Joe Schwartz was the coach in Tennessee when Matt Burke got a job as like a young quality control guy in Tennessee with Joe Schwartz. And they kind of they first brought this wide 9 defensive end alignment and style of defense to the NFL. Nebraska and other teams have been doing it in college. I ran it in college a little bit, so I know. And I know how it's supposed to look in theory, but we sucked at it. So I never got to see the full force of it. But Jesus, Jim Schwartz, my God. So Jim Schwartz was running it in Tennessee. Matt Burke goes. He learns under there. Jim Washburn was a defensive line coach there, who's just a legend. But a lot of the same concepts of just getting after it aggressively upfield. I think Jim Schwartz will, do a lot of zone to man concepts. So like you'll look at some of the stat sites and they'll say that the Browns are a heavy zone defense when they're converting to man really quickly there. But very, very tenacious, aggressive defense. And they do a lot of the things that the Texans aspire to do. The one thing I wonder about it is like, okay, how much of this with Matt Burke, perhaps hopefully in having that time with Jim Schwartz and being steeped in that offense or in that defense might be able to help the Texans out a little bit. That's usually overstated.
Nico Collins, obviously it seems like they've established a connection with King Dowell, still out. He's big. The challenge of going against him for you guys.
Big guy, great at the catch point, can run a bunch of routes, but he's just a big target. So he's a guy, you got to be in phase with. You got to play physical with him. Great receiver as well, and I think him and CJ are one of the better duos in the league for sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Greg.
So when we get to JOK, this dude, as we saw in the Texans game, can just flat out make plays. And you look at like how he's used. He's an athlete, man. Like
makeup or something.
Okay. And it's like I think he's a guy that's kind of been unleashed by Jim Schwartz and some of the creative things that Jim Schwartz is willing to do. And also kind of like let go of those notions of how a linebacker is supposed to play. Like Jim Schwartz helps unlock guys like this. And he's just, I don't even know. I'm guessing he doesn't have a boatload of sacks or interceptions or like these glaringly awesome stats this year, but he just shows up all the time. It feels like every time I watch a Browns game, somehow he pops up in kind of like a leaps off the screen type of fashion.
Jeremiah, I know you obviously, the first time around, you guys, prepared somewhat for CJ because there was at least a somewhat uncertainty. Now that you get preparing fully for him, how much different are they compared to what you saw a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, it's a little more blank, based upon like what their concepts are, what we'll be expecting. We have more footage on CJ than we did the last quarterback, so it's a little bit of a challenge. Of course, reference to personnel would be a challenge. CJ is the type of player that he is, which is an awesome player, and then they have the real good backs, real good lines. So be a challenge for us overall, but it'll be a little bit more understood because we have more footage on it.
I think the one thing you almost hope sometimes with a team like the Browns is they're so good defensively, but they're also very aggressive that they, I think CJ has a good feel for when people are ready to get double moved. And the trick is just getting the pass protection and the time to do it. So, like, the run game is improved. It's still not where you'd love it to be, but it's enough that I think they can justify keeping a fullback in the game. They can justify having 2 tight ends and have a couple of them block for a little bit before they release on their routes. That because they're running just well enough to get into good third down situations. That's the cat and mouse game here. Is just, okay, how many resources are you gonna devote to protecting CJ and hopefully allow some routes to develop downfield? Because it's a challenge. That Myles Garrett's going to be all over the place. And I know the Texans have done a good job game planning for him before. It's just that if he's on that day and you don't have it schemed up perfectly, it can be a headache, like a literal headache. The kid had a concussion. Damn it.
Yeah, I don't think it's like a edge thing where you come in and he's a rookie quarterback and he may struggle with this, he may struggle with that. I think he's mature enough to be able to, and he's seen enough football to be able to execute in the way that he should. I don't think him being a rookie quarterback is going to affect his play at all.
There you go. That makes sense. The tackles for a loss makes sense because it's not like, I just remember he doesn't have a boatload of the conventional stat line stats, but like I just kept seeing him, so that makes sense. Tackles for a loss.
Does he face everything defensively now?
Well, I mean, he's faced similar defenses. The Jets runs, some of the front to us and some of the concepts. So he's faced similar defenses, and I think he's seen enough film of us to be able to execute in the way that he should.
You guys talk about,
the big thing about the Browns, one of the other weird things about the Browns is that they've turned the ball over on offense a bunch. And you'd think with 4 different quarterbacks, you turn the ball over that much, it should be killing you. Part of it is that the Browns defense has forced a bunch of turnovers. So they've been able to balance that out. With CJ, the thing when you talk about him being a veteran versus a rookie, and he's more of a veteran in a lot of ways, the fact that CJ is throwing the ball at 7.9 yards per attempt or wherever he's settled in at right now, but especially early in the season when he was throwing it like damn near 8 yards per attempt, he wasn't turning the ball over. And like to the point where sometimes I think he almost might have, like very early on, he was overly cautious and yet still unleashing it downfield. But there were times where he would take sacks or he'd double clutch it. And he got that out of his system very quickly. I think the good thing is that by this point in the season, he's seen enough that I don't think he's going to get fooled by the obvious stuff. It's just going to be a matter of like a lot of it's going to be the decision making of when to get rid of the ball, when to perhaps thread the needle and some of those things versus into those tight windows. But it's nothing that's like the Browns. The Browns aren't a mystery defensively. They just play really good defense. They're very sound and they beat guys physically and get after the ball. But like I don't think there's necessarily a bunch of stuff to fool CJ per se. It's just a matter of all the other personnel playing well enough for him to take advantage of it.
I've gone 1-0 every week, but how different is it, your mindset with this being a playoff game?
Oh, well, each week we say, we're trying to go 1-0, and there's possibly a game right after that. This one is more like we really, embrace that concept and that motto to go 1-0. So that's it does intensify it a bit. I'm not one that's going to lessen the game and say, it's just a regular game. The city of Cleveland has been waiting for this game, right? The organization has been waiting for this game. It's not just a quote unquote just another game. I think there is a bit of an intensification in reference to the speed of the game, in reference to guys pulling something out of themselves that they haven't seen in the regular season. I think it's more to it.
What do you think your emotions are going to be like?
Well, in reference to emotions, I mean, we have a certain concept on defense that emotions will die down eventually. Joe Flacco got up in the team meeting yesterday, and he said that this is an emotional season, and this you have waves here, but at the end of the day, when you get into the game, some snaps in, the emotions are going to die down, and this will be a game, right? This will be a game based upon discipline, based upon the fundamentals in which we've been fighting for all year, and that's what Joe Flacco emphasized yesterday in reference to his experience.
Was that your biggest takeaway from that?
Yeah, that's one thing. Just I don't know, relative to playoffs, yeah, the emotions are heightened, but I think that is that's like a standard word from the wise to the young in football about emotion, like including during the week. Like the emotion can only take you so far too. Like again, you might need to manage your nerves at the beginning of a game, but they kind of fall out too. But the emotion in terms of just like really like genuinely hating your opponent or being mad about something you saw tweeted or something like that, that all just fades, and it's about getting down to work. And like obviously Flacco knows about that. I feel like I feel like the Browns defense, like Jim Schwartz and D'Amico are similar in that they expect their guys to be flying around, to be very physical. I think Jim Schwartz just has more of that personality outwardly. D'Amico tends to get it almost just, I mean, for one, just by being kind of scary looking himself still athletically, but they both have different methods and ways, and they lead in different ways. But ultimately, they just want guys that are going to fly around like crazy all over the place. Then offensively, these two schemes are very similar. The more I talk about the Browns and the more I listen to Browns players, they're very similar in that they're both Kubshanistani offenses. They both have the same roots of a lot of their defensive concepts, and they've both sustained a bunch of injuries this year. The Browns have done it on the quarterback side of things that makes them particularly unique. But this is a little bit of the two Spider-Men pointing at each other here.
Got up and talked about their playoff experience.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of key. And that's probably the best team meeting that I've been a part of, just in reference to the focus, in reference to the emphasis on making sure that you take every opportunity with, intensity, with intentionality. And I think that that's the important part going into this whole week has to be intentional. I believe it was Coach Schwartz that said that, when you have a great play, it can make you a legend. But if you have a great mistake, it can worsen the cases for you. But I think,
what's he do if you call him Joe Schwartz instead of Jim?
and that's the idea this week in the process, to make sure that we correct all the mistakes and figure out what we need to overcome.
It seems like you've been here for quite a while, but you weren't here in 2020.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the first season of 2020?
I think the question was something about he moved here in 2020 and probably something about the state of the city or something.
I feel good about it. I think that within that first 4 years of your rookie contract, if you can experience it, every year, that's a good thing. But also, if you can experience it once or twice, just being able to get that experience in. There's been a lot of guys that's been in the league 10 plus years, and that's never been. I was talking to Taki earlier, and he was talking about how in 2020.
Hey, what happened? Taki? What the hell?
In 2020, the team that we had in 2020 wasn't as close as it is now. So I think that that's something to be proud of in reference to the culture that we have and we are continuing to build here.
You guys ended up with number one ranked defense in multiple categories. Obviously, the clock kind of resets here now with the postseason started. But just how much pride do you guys take in that? And, how do you travel that here into the playoffs and carry that forward?
I don't think we carry it necessarily over in reference to statistics. I think the score is 0-0. I think that we are coming into this with a clean slate. Of course, we have the mindset and the pride in the good way that we have the Cleveland name on our back, right? We have the city on our back. We have the organization on our back. And we have, our names and what we've built as a team and as a defense. It's very important to uphold that standard. And I think that that's what we're aiming to do going into the postseason. Of course, the statistics are important. We celebrate those, but the slate is 0-0, and we're looking to build something more from the postseason.
So as far as the team rankings for the defense, let me just look up my favorite. Oh, I can't do this anymore. Yeah, you guys ever go to that team rankings website? It's awesome right up until the playoffs start. And I guess it would still be because it's all still been regular season. But then, it gets into the playoffs, and they still, they incorporate. There's no differentiation between the averages, the scoring averages, and everything. They just add the regular season on into the playoffs, and it pisses me off. So if we look up, okay, so team defense, as far as the Browns and where they ended up, 2023. That can't be right, is it? There we go. Texans allowed the fewest passing touchdowns. This is the anomaly for you Browns fans that are here. This is the weird thing about the Texans pass defense is that they give up huge chunks of yardage, and yet when they get down into the red zone, they're actually pretty good at defending the pass. It's actually really weird. In terms of yards per attempt, the Texans finished, even after last week's performance where Jonathan Taylor ran a country mile, Texans finished second in yards per attempt, rush defense. Passing yardage, the Cleveland Browns finished number 1 overall. They allowed several more touchdowns than the Texans did. In terms of total yardage rushing, the Texans ended up 6th in total rushing. Browns were not as, I guess, that was, that's right. That's one thing that we looked at as an opportunity, perhaps, is that the Browns pass defense is a lot better than its rush defense. But it's not like the rush defense is bad or anything. But for Devin Singletary, who's gotten steadily a lot better over the course of the season, and you know what the biggest BS about some of the stats is, let's see, points against, scoring defense. Commanders, no, points allowed. Ravens were number 1. Texans were number 11. And the Cleveland Browns were 13th in scoring. I know there's more to that than meets the eye. But like the run defense, I'm not buying into that one as a potential thing to be exploited by this Browns defense.
Wasn't as good on the road as at home for much of the year, but then you guys went down to Houston and played a really good game. Do you think you guys take confidence from traveling like you did on that day for that game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing sometimes when you experience difficulties early in the season, so that you have that experience to be able to say, hey, I've overcame this already. This is something that I'm familiar with. So for us to, have those away games that we did overcome, it gives us a little bit of edge going into this postseason that right now it looks like it's going to be nothing but away games. So, again, we're focused on 1-0 and focused in that model of role warriors, and that's very important. So,
when you talk about the closest of this team and it being different, where does that come from?
I think it comes from the people. Can't come from anywhere but the people, right? I think that when we put the right people in place, put the right people into the positions that they need to be in, you see the closeness, you see the camaraderie, you see the chemistry, you see the ability for us to, rub off of each other. There's anchors, there's different parts of the puzzle, right? Everybody has a different role, and I think that when you put the right people in the right positions, you see the fruition of a close team.
Okay, what is the biggest indicator to you that this team is just not satisfied?
I got smart dudes on this team. I saw, okay, so he just used the word fruition. CJ, what did CJ? CJ said multitudes about something the other day. They have a bunch of damn poets in the NFL these days.
Yeah, the biggest indicator is just doing more. I think we've just in the first 2 days of this week, we see people coming in a little bit earlier, staying in a little bit later. More text messages. Hey, look, make sure you watch this. Hey, I saw this on, with the running back, or I saw this with the quarterback. Make sure y'all key this, right? I think that is the biggest indicator, is just people doing it. It's nothing that they're saying. It's nothing that the coaches are saying. None of that, right? I think the emphasis this week is on the action, right? The word is important, right? But if the word doesn't become manifest, it becomes vain. So.
Okay, yeah. Wait, if the word isn't manifest, the word becomes vain. All right, that sounds biblical or something. You guys, you're good at educating me about the biblical stuff. As far as the text messaging back and forth and everything about things and kind of being dialed in like that, I do think, damn it, that's something that's funny. The Texans have talked a little bit about both CJ and somebody else about not changing up your routine too much. Because like if the routine is the routine, then you should be doing just fine with whatever you're doing. I think that like that's the kind of stuff that just is naturally happens. Everybody does just become that much more dialed in because there's a difference to playoff football. It is just like you get on the field. I remember my rookie year, the first time being in the playoffs, being like, oh, this is violent. You know, like this is a whole different level of defense. Or the first time I was in playoff football, it was a different feel. It was a different level of intensity to it. So it's definitely different. But you just like, I don't think it's anything the coaches have to coach. It's if you have the right kinds of guys, they naturally rise to that level. And I think what JOK is talking about there is that. All right, I'm gonna do the let me look at some of these questions. I see a lot of you guys. I see you guys are just fighting now. So we've got enough Browns fans in here that people are just fighting. So I don't know how many I can even pick out of here where I understand exactly what you guys are talking about. Let's see. When they do give up pass plays, it's the worst kind. Yeah, the Texans. With our the Texans have a really weird dynamic where they give up a boatload of passing yardage, but very few passing touchdowns. It's just that they've given up passing yardage in chunks at times, and then they dial it down into the red zone. I know I see some talk about fishing in there. I had made a comment about Lake Erie being polluted in a previous video, in which I was otherwise pretty complimentary about the Browns. And that's the most pushback I've gotten from a fan base, I think. It was interesting because I would say 2/3 of Browns fans that commented on the Lake Erie pollution were like, yeah, it's polluted. And 1/3 were like angrily defending it. And the defense was, it doesn't catch on fire anymore. It's totally not polluted. Like, listen, they're all polluted now. We've got a serious issue with our lakes being polluted in this country. And don't even try to come at me with any argument about anything other than just lake pollution. I'm not trying to turn this into some kind of greenhouse gas debate. This isn't that kind of cable television station. They're all polluted. Lake Erie's polluted. It's not as polluted as it used to be, but it's still polluted. You know, like everybody just, back off. Maybe just keep your dairy cows a little bit further away from the streams. Don't use so much fertilizer on your lawn. And maybe we'll be able to take our kids swimming sometime soon. I caught syphilis by swimming in Lake Erie at the Cedar Point. That was the story I told my girlfriend. I caught it swimming in Lake Erie at Cedar Point Amusement Park. That was the whole thing. Oh, nobody's fighting. Okay. That's good. They're talking about fishing. It's natural pollution. All right. I want to watch CJ. I pulled some clips of CJ Stroud, quarterback for the Houston Texans, from the Pat McAfee show. And I think Pat McAfee always does a great job getting the most out of these guys because he and his cohorts there do a really good job of making people feel comfortable. And that is a skill. Because typically when people go on any television show, they're going to be usually a little bit nervous that their words are going to get twisted.
I appreciate that, man.
Hold off a second, buddy. I know you appreciate it. I was complimenting Pat McAfee, not you, CJ. All right. So, again, I'm not trying to give short shrift to the McAfee crew. But I cut these down as much as possible so that it doesn't get shut down by a copyright. Plus, McAfee's doing just fine, I think. McAfee doesn't need the Seth Payne show publicity to put him over. Although, I mean, he's battling with the people at ESPN right now. He called out that one executive, accused them of trying to sabotage his show. And I find it interesting because I've seen all these people saying like, well, ESPN employees have never spoken out like this, or when this ESPN employee said whatever, he got in trouble or she got fired. I don't know. Is it clear that McAfee's even an employee? I think McAfee is more like a partner, right? I mean, he still owns his YouTube channel and he owns the Pat McAfee show. And I think McAfee knows full well. I think he suspected at some point he would butt heads with ESPN, but in the meantime, he's getting a whole lot of extra publicity and people subscribing to his YouTube channel and everything. And he's going to be just fine if all of a sudden he has to part ways with ESPN. But this was CJ talking about, he was asked, like, how is he so mature and how is he so good at this so young?
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I really feel like I was kind of groomed into this, going to Ohio State, winning a lot of big games, losing a lot of big games, having to be the leader on the team. When everything hits the fan, everybody's looking at you. And at that point, it was like 108,000 in our stadium. But now it's a little less, but it's still a lot of pressure. But like I said before, I think pressure is a privilege. And I think God put a special spirit in my heart to be able to calm the storm and rally guys around. And I also have a great teammates to do it with me.
Okay. So, you know what? For any of the Browns fans that are here, you obviously know a little bit about CJ Stroud. That's been it's been a running theme this year, and I think CJ's trying not to be too loud about it. He's kind of mentioned a few times that, hey, some of these empty seats, I understand it's been rough here. It's going to be awesome someday when we can pack this stadium. But he's also dropped it a couple times that, like, man, all right, at Ohio State, it's one of the craziest atmospheres. These are my words, not his. But he's kind of alluded to the fact that at Ohio State, it's one of the craziest atmospheres there is. And you got 108,000 really loud, really enthusiastic people at your games. It's been, I think, for him and Will Anderson and some of the other guys, it's been a little bit of a drop off to see exactly how it can be in the NFL at times. That it's not always, you're not in the horseshoe. But and by the way, Pat McAfee has always been very complimentary of NRG Stadium, and you know, I think CJ in one of these clips references some of the things that Pat McAfee has said about it. Because when McAfee was playing, that was back when things were still pretty good and competitive, and it got really super loud in that stadium, which hopefully it will this week. Next one was CJ on that pass to Nico. This might be the one that ends up getting me shut down because this is a longer clip with actual football action on it. But McAfee just gushing about the fadeaway would be either an intentional grounding or an interception where it looked like CJ just was throwing it up for a prayer and ended up being a Nico Collins reception. CJ described exactly what happened on that play.
They were in man-to-man coverage, and they rolled the safety down, so he took away my first option. I went to my second option, and they were in man, so he did a good job of having sticky coverage. So at that point, I'm trying to find my check down, and check downs aren't always great in man-to-man coverage because they're matching. So I knew there was time to scramble, so I tried to step up and scramble, and I think somebody got loose, so I spent left. Try to find a way out, and DeForest Buckner, who's a heck of a player, a lot of respect for that guy. He's a unit. He's like 6'10", 350. He's moving fast as heck. So I got up out of there, and I kind of seen Nico take off, and I was like, I don't have much, but I'm going to just try to give him a shot. And with that guy, man, you give him a shot, he's going to go make a play. I always say the eye in the sky don't lie. So you watch the film, you put on the tape, even from college, like, you can't play at Ohio State under Coach Day, who's a world-renowned offensive coordinator.
I lost myself in my StreamYard. Hold on a second.
Give him a shot, and with that guy, man, you give him a shot, he's gonna go make a play.
Okay. So, like that, and Nico talked about it in the post game. Like that was just pure scramble drill, right? And like him and Nico have formed that relationship over time. He talked earlier this week about how he just flat out told Nico that he could tell he was going to be a star and he needed to be a star. And Nico, or CJ, talks all the time about feeding those guys, like literally feeding them. Like he needs to put food on his receivers' table. He wants to get them paid. They have formed that relationship, and like that's a part of. I'm intrigued to watch Nico versus this Browns defense, where it's going to be a lot tougher than it was last week. But if Robert Woods can come back and be at least one option to loosen things up, I really want to see these guys versus this defense. CJ and Nico versus this defense. It's going to be a test. And some of that kind of unspoken sixth sense communication could be huge and vital in this game. If Nico gets close to 100 yards receiving in this game, I'm going to be really cool with that. He doesn't have to have an otherworldly performance. it's just going to be a hard fought. It's going to be a hard fought 100 yards if he gets it, but it's going to open up things for hopefully a lot of other people.
They say the eye in the sky don't lie. So you watch the film, you put on the tape.
Okay, so this was they were talking about the S2 cognition test, and honestly, they kind of got into it where. So for those of you who weren't paying attention during draft season, the S2 cognition test, this new test has been going around for a while, that it supposedly tracks a player's ability to, or it supposedly tests players' ability to track multiple moving objects at once. It's not an intelligence test. And even though knowing all we know about how intelligence tests themselves are fallible and that there's plenty of smart people that do poorly on standardized tests and vice versa, it's not an intelligence test, this S2 cognition test. And yet people were taking the low S2 cognition test and acting like it was a low IQ score. So I'm insulted on that front. I'm also insulted by the fact that even people who were taking it as a visual cognition test took it as literally and as seriously as they did. They'd never heard of it before, and yet they were acting like it was the be-all, end-all to quarterback diagnostic tests. It was absurd. CJ performed really poorly on it. Not an intelligence test. And the McAfee guys were having fun with it, but they kind of were saying like, "Oh, I guess you should draft the dumbest guy in football because apparently that's what, or the dumbest guy at the test." It's not an intelligence test. Anyway, here's CJ on that S2 test.
I always say the eye in the sky don't lie. So you watch the film, you put on the tape, even from college, like you can't play at Ohio State and under Coach Day, who's a world-renowned offensive coordinator, play caller. His offense is pretty deep when it comes to being knowledgeable. You have to know everything. I even have more responsibilities in college than I do now in this offense, in this scheme. So
yeah, but that means you're only going to get better, which sucks for us.
So obviously these guys are all, Pat McAfee's an Indy guy, as are his buddies there. So they were kind of having fun with just the fact that CJ's really good and going to be in the division for a long time and how much that sucks for them. You know, we talked about this a lot, and I know the Ohio people here know this. Like the offense with any given coordinator is going to change based on who the quarterback is and what he can handle. And the offense was going to be different for Cardale Jones than it was for Justin Fields or for CJ Stroud or for anybody else. So I think that part of it was way overblown. I do think, though, aside from people trying to compare Ohio State quarterback to Ohio State quarterback, the thing that was lost in the mix weirdly so last year was that the Ohio State offense, yes, it had a lot of really good receivers that made the level of difficulty easier in some respects, but the offense itself was plenty complex by college standards, and they had option routes. They had a lot of things that they certainly don't do at Clemson, that scouts looked at and saw as evidence that CJ could handle a certain amount of processing above and beyond. With some quarterbacks in some places, you just can't tell. So anyway, it's all in the past now. RIP S2 cognition test. Oh, the other big thing too was that the Texans there's only a certain number of teams that are allowed to subscribe to that test. The S2 does that to try to, create a competitive advantage. And the Texans are not one of them. The Panthers are. The Panthers, they love them some S2. They pay probably a lot of money for it. The Texans do not pay for that subscription.
Excited to see this play.
Oh, I keep forgetting that I have to tell you guys these questions because of the damn copyright stuff. I can tell I've been live streaming a little too long this session just because I'm completely lost. And I've got way too many tabs open. Okay. This is him on using doubters as motivation, I believe.
Place packed, man.
Oh, no. He's excited to see the place packed. He's excited to see NRG Stadium packed.
I'm excited to see this place packed, man.
It's going to be loud.
It's going to be loud, really loud. I know you said that this is probably the loudest stadium you played in.
Ever, yeah.
Yeah, I think even just to piggyback off what you said, playing in Indianapolis, that was probably the loudest stadium I played in NFL.
Wow.
So that was like a college atmosphere.
How about that? That's a lot.
I love that time. I like being the villain, like run out to the booze, and you guys had the light show going on. A lot of cute stuff.
They made you, what was that?
A lot of cute stuff.
It was. Cute.
CJ got, let me run through this.
I feel like
he had fun with them. Like he knew it's like the thing by now is like guys have watched the McAfee show enough that they know that they can go and have fun, and like any of the ribbing and stuff is just going to be just, it's like obviously like when they were talking about him being dumb, obviously he wasn't taking that as them actually calling them dumb. I'm just sensitive on behalf of like some people that perform poorly on actual IQ tests. So like the fact that McAfee, I know, has said that before, that NRG is really loud. And I don't know if CJ saw that or if they were talking about that beforehand. I do feel like CJ has kind of made it one of his personal missions to change the environment in there and get it back to what it had been before. I do think that, like, honestly, like, I think it needs to be our personal mission to be sure we get it back to, and maybe better, because we are a late arriving bunch here in Houston. Like, because let's not forget, his agent is David Mulligetta, who's awesome at getting guys lots and lots of money, even if it means moving them back to their hometown of LA or something. So I just don't want to, I'm just putting it out there. Just get there and yell your faces off, damn it. Next question. Next answer was about using doubters as motivation. They had brought up that Stephen A. Smith has gushed about CJ Stroud, but he also doesn't think that a rookie quarterback can do well in the playoffs. And they played that up a little bit. And CJ wasn't really taking the bait, but he did talk about using haters as motivation.
Like, any motivation is good motivation, you know? So I think it'll be a lie. People say they don't listen to the media, or like, of course, like, we don't necessarily care, but everybody hears it. Like, the day and age where we live in, social media, you have access to like everything, TV, your phone, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. I personally try to log out to everything, but people text me stuff and things. So you hear about it and you're like, man, like, I wonder why they think like that. Let me go prove them wrong. But our mindset here, let's prove ourselves right. We knew what we had in this locker room.
That part, I get a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
Like using, I mean, like, Browns fans know this, going back to Johnny Manziel, or really honestly like a young Baker Mayfield. Using your haters as fuel for motivation is a dicey proposition. I think CJ has talked about how he tries to stay off social media as much as possible. It's the damn friends and family. Like, I don't know why they think they're doing dudes a favor by forwarding hate to them, like as if they're the only person, or they think that their friend, because they love him, needs to know that somebody is saying about this. Stop it. It doesn't do anybody any good. Like, it doesn't do anybody any good. All it does is just, it's one more negative voice in their head, especially if they're trying to ignore it as much as possible. They don't need to hear that. And that's why, like, if you're a young athlete, just tell your friends and family, please, I would appreciate it if you just don't send me that negativity. I don't need it in my life. You'd probably be happier too, as a friend and family member, if you try to ignore the negativity as much as possible. It goes for just about anybody in life these days. Next question. Oh, he was asked about D'Amico Ryans, and I can't remember which one of the guys asked him this, but it was in the vein of, like, people wondered about hiring a defensive coach in D'Amico Ryans. It seems like he's been the perfect fit.
I said it before, but I think D'Amico was a perfect person for this job. He was the one, when I met him, he was like, this is the only job he wanted, to be a head coach, because he played for the Texans. He wanted to uplift the city of Houston. So I would say, man, like, if you're looking for a head coach, you want to look for somebody who cares about the city, cares about winning, cares about his players, has been in the position before that he's done that before, you know? So when I look at D'Amico, like, of course, like, yeah, we're figuring out a lot of stuff together, but man, like, the poise that he has, the trust that he puts in his players, the accountability that he holds us to, the standard that he sets, you know, every day you see him put constant work in, you know, so there's nothing to do but just follow that, you know, and to be a great leader, you have to be a great follower as well. So that's all I do with him, man. I listen to him a lot. He's a man of God. He definitely cares about his players. He always asks us what we want instead of just putting things out there. He puts a multitude of things on the table, from just team issues or like even locker room stuff. Like, we need a new shower heads. He got us new shower heads, you know. So like, just little stuff. And some head coaches
that's good baby face move.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So like, that even like, it's a small thing that makes your players want to play for you a little harder, you know. So
the shower heads are important. That was Captain Queeg, right? In Catch 22. Am I getting those right, or am I mixing up my old books again? I think in Catch 22, one of the issues was that the shower heads were like pathetic and like nobody was allowed to shower. And that was one of the reasons they hated Captain Queeg. So D'Amico Ryan's the opposite of Captain Queeg. And everybody feel free to correct me there in the comments on that one. As far as D'Amico and his demeanor, sorry, I'm seeing I just caught a glimpse of the Deshaun Watson dialogue. As far as D'Amico and his demeanor, the cool thing about D'Amico is that I think he is one of those coaches that you can be soft-spoken isn't the right word because he's not soft-spoken, but he's not a yeller and he's not a screamer, but he holds guys to a very, very high standard. And I think he's somebody who commands respect in such a way that it doesn't really matter like how few of the old school coaching mentalities or stereotypes he fits. He just gets the best out of guys, partly because they crave his respect, but also because he has really high standards and he's gonna, coach them very aggressively on the actual problem. One of my favorite coaches ever, who was like old school hard ass in a lot of ways, but just awesome, was Frank. Jesus, excuse my language here, but one of his lessons was always attack the person, not the problem. Frank Gantz Sr. Attack the problem, not the person. So when he was attacking something, like he always made it very clear, I'm attacking a problem. We've got a common problem. I'm not attacking the person. I'm attacking the problem. And like that's very much a D'Amico thing. He's going to attack problems. He's not going to attack the person. And guys respect that. They feel that. And then you're in alliance with each other. As I'm getting my ass chewed by Frank Gantz Sr., I realize like, hey, him and I are on the same side. He's not attacking me. He might be using pronouns to make it sound like he's attacking me, but he's actually attacking a problem. Next question. Next was about, CJ and his approach going into the Georgia game. This was after a really long conversation about he used to be very superstitious, and then he changed his pregame routine into being something that was a little bit less superstitious and more just about getting warmed up and more about ritual. Something I always recommend that if you're superstitious at all, just see if maybe what you are is just more about the ritual of it, because there's a lot of reasons to get into rituals and to get yourself into a mindset. But you don't necessarily if you start believing you have to hit a certain number of free throws or you're going to have a horrible game or something like that, that can be counterproductive. But they sprung off of that onto his mental approach going into the Georgia game last year, in which they lost, but CJ played very well.
I came into that game like I would say I wouldn't say that was probably my best college game. I think that was my most free game. Where I was like, man, whatever happens, I don't really care. I'm gonna go out with no regrets.
So mentally, you feel
I
good.
just let go, because it's a lot of pressure playing at Ohio State, man. Losing one game, especially like the games we lost, like we're still a really good team, but like our fan base, everybody told us like we sucked at that point, So it was like I was like, man, you know what? And a lot of our fans stuck true. It's like the social media fans. That's what I call it. Like you'll go to and you'll see a stadium, and Coach Day used to tell me this, like you could think the whole stadium hates you. They really don't. Our fans love us, But losing that game doesn't help. And it's like those 500 negative fans that are in the
which is a lot of scrolls.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So that was a really good point that McAfee made when he said it's a lot of scrolls. Those 500 fans, when he says it's a lot of scrolls, what he meant was like that takes a lot of time to scroll down through all those hates. If it's 500 people leaving negative comments, you end up scrolling down and reading a whole bunch of negativity, and that just seeps into your brain. That's a good message by Ryan Day, that how people feel on social media. Like it's often a very loud and vocal and funny, but vocal and loud minority that's viciously critical. And then even a lot of the people, whether it's on social media or just in general, like it's passing, they're mad and they're angry, but they don't actually hate you. That's one of the best things about having kids, is that you really learn and get comfortable not caring about somebody who temporarily hates you. So if you raise a kid, and at any given time, when they're young, they're going to hate you. And they really hate you, They don't have the ability to sustain it yet. But in that moment, like when you're not giving them what they really want, but and you're comfortable just not giving them that because it's not good for them, they hate you. And you learn like, oh, okay, well, that's all right. They're not going anywhere. I just they'll love me eventually, like in 10 minutes, whatever. That can help, but I don't advise that to like high school athletes. Don't go out and have a kid just so you can learn how to deal with hate better. All right, and then I got lost with wherever he was. Let's see where he is.
When I look at D'Amico, like, of course, like, yeah, we're figuring out a lot of stuff together.
Okay, so that was D'Amico. Let's try it here. Supposed to shorten that wallpaper.
I wouldn't say that was probably my best college game. I think that was my most free game.
Yeah, so that part of it too, when he was talking about it was his most free game, I think mentally he went into it. He had mentioned just, kind of being calm and comfortable. And he talked the other day about how he likes to see his mom up in the stands during the game because it's kind of just, lets him know that everything's all right and that ultimately his mom still loves him. I had that revelation before a game once. It was the first game my senior year, and I was getting a lot of attention from scouts and everything, and I was team captain and all that, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, like both from a team perspective and an individual perspective. And I just had this like kind of epiphany before the game that like, oh, you know what? No matter what happens, my mom still loves me. And like I went out, which is kind of I felt like at the time I was like, that's weird, Seth, stupid. But the feeling remained, and I went out and I played like a lot freer and looser, and I tried to remember that from that point forward. Let's see. I think I had one more. Let's see where we are.
It was like I was like, man, you know what? And a lot of our fans stuck true. It's like the social media fans. That's what I call it. Like you'll go to and you'll see a stadium, and Coach Day used to tell me this, like you could think the whole stadium hates you. They really don't.
Okay, so let me take a couple questions here. You guys have been talking a lot of smack. I invited the Browns fans here, so I feel like we learned. Did you guys learn some things from the Browns fans in the comments here? I see that M. Williams, I think, is a Browns fan, and that Timmy Green was. Tim Green, who ended up being like a good dude after like oddly coming at me in a weird way because he got sensitive about Joe Flacco. That was strange. In the life of Colby. Okay, Browns defense has the highest sack percentage and number 2 in pressure percentage, 27.6%. Yeah. It's not just Myles Garrett. They do that a whole bunch. I see you trying to build it. So that's a little bit of the back and forth between Joe Flacco and Browns fans. I've been really impressed with Flacco. I don't think it's some bubble or balloon that's going to burst. I do wonder just how good they can be versus like on a week-to-week basis in the playoffs without having any semblance of a rushing attack, like how they can fare. Like obviously they beat the Texans and multiple teams so far without running the ball very well. But ultimately, like, does that come back and bite them at some point? Yeah, they're not favored to win the Super Bowl or anything. Let's see. Lumineer. Okay. Did anybody answer my Captain Queeg thing? Somebody asked, will this be the biggest win in Texans history? Let's see. Somebody asked that. I meant to. All right. Would this be the biggest win in Texans history? We had that discussion before. That's hard to say. I think that it's a different. It might be. This is by far the best feel I've had about a division championship. I don't get too worked up about division championships. This one, because the Texans just came out of nowhere, and because there's just so much optimism about D'Amico and CJ, it feels different. You're doing it with a rookie quarterback. Like that it's hard not to get wrapped up in thinking about all that it might be a preface to or prelude to. So that part of it is just like that part of it's really, really cool. So would this be the biggest win? I think the first playoff victory versus the Bengals was really, really big. First game ever was big, but for completely different reasons. Obviously I'm biased because I played in that game. I've never had that experience in my entire life of a feeling like that from the fan base. That was just such a cathartic moment where people had been without a football team for so long, and you were like such an intense underdog. And remember, like we'd gotten the snot beat out of us by I got 2 minutes left. 2 minutes. We'd gotten the snot beat out of us by the Cowboys in a scrimmage, like just during training camp. And Dom Capers did a good job of kind of playing possum on that one. We didn't play any of our starters in the scrimmage, and they rolled all over us. And I think kind of came in a little bit cocky. They caught a couple of the Cowboys players and coaches sounding pretty cocky after that scrimmage. And then they came into NRG for the first game ever and got destroyed by an expansion team, which the scoreboard didn't show that they were destroyed. But I saw the looks in those overweight offensive linemen's eyes. They were glazed over and about to keel over. So that was big, but like I'd never had an experience with the fans that way. But yeah, I think that really if this ends up being the biggest win so far, it's going to depend on what comes after it. And like if it's prelude to like a really incredible run by CJ and D'Amico, then I think we'll remember this as one of the great ones. But it definitely feels different. Feels a lot different than with anybody. And I love Gary Kubiak. I love Dom Capers. It's a different feel with D'Amico. He's just he's different. All right, everybody. Hey, Browns fans who showed up, thank you. Appreciate it. I like you guys' input. You guys actually give me some good education at times. Usually it comes later, not in the live chat. But feel free to DM me on x.com. I'm Seth C. Payne on there. That's pretty much the only way to get a hold of me. I don't do a good enough job of checking like if you want to get a DM, or I'll check the comments later if you have just any information you want to give. Appreciate it.